Invasion of the Body Snatchers is largely considered to be one of the best science fiction films ever made. What makes this film the granddaddy of alien invasion movies, and why was it so controversial when it was first released? We'll find out on this episode of Rerun Zone. Invasion of the Body Snatchers was a modest little horror film made on a shoestring budget in just 3 weeks, yet it delivered one of the most significant social commentaries of the 1950s. In 1956, the Hollywood blacklist was shaping every production decision in the film industry. Most potential screenwriters and actors had to be cleared of any communist sympathizer allegations, no matter how ridiculous, before the studios could employ them. Studio executives worried about potential boycotts, so any project that appeared to be slightly political was generally scrapped. But around the fringes of the film industry, on the sets of B films and in genre staples like westerns, crime films, and science fiction films, filmmakers found a place to voice their concerns, because they weren't making a movie based on real-life issues. Invasion of the Body Snatchers was one such movie. Director Don Siegel spent most of the 50s making little B films in the crime genre, learning his craft from other filmmakers and working through the night to save money. Instead of using a Hollywood soundstage, he chose nearby places to shoot in, giving his films an air of authenticity. He cast hungry young actors as his stars and worked closely with them to get the strongest possible performances. He then used strong character actors to fill out the scenes. Some of them longtime friends, like director and screenwriter Sam Peckinpah as a meter reader. Walter Wanger, the movie's producer, had a storied career in Hollywood, as he spent some jail time after shooting his wife's agent. After his release, he decided to make social commentary films that would have been great in the 1930s, but were now off limits in the 1950s. Major studios avoided Wanger like the plague, but he soon found a home with small studio allied artists. Wanger first hired Don Siegel to direct a little film called Riot in Cell Block 11, which became a surprise hit. Meanwhile, he had read Jack Finney's 1955 novel, The Body Snatchers, and optioned it for allied artists, intending to have Siegel direct it. He approached Siegel with the notion of using science fiction and horror to combat what he saw as conformity in American society. The film's message was kept very subtle, though, because of the science fiction element. The initial plan for Invasion of the Body Snatchers was for a 24-day filming with a budget of around $450,000. The studio then requested Wanger to reduce the budget drastically. A 20-day filming schedule was then set and budgeted at $350,000. The production went 3 days over schedule because of the night-for-night filming that Siegel insisted on. That means they filmed the night scenes at night instead of during the day, which was a common practice. The Body Snatchers was the film's original working title, same as the Jack Finney novel that inspired it. Wanger didn't want any confusion with the 1945 film The Body Snatcher, and the studio wanted a more exploitive title. Director Siegel suggested 2 titles, Better Off Dead and Sleep No More. Wanger had 2 of his own suggestions, Evil in the Night and World in Danger. But the studio finally settled on Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which combined the title of the book with a more disturbing mood. Wanger wanted Orson Welles to appear in a video introduction, associating the movie with The War of the Worlds 1939 radio science fiction classic, but Welles rejected the idea. Wanger had considered top-tier actors like Gig Young, Dick Powell, Anne Bancroft, and Vera Miles. He abandoned these options, however, due to the reduced budget. He then chose Richard Kiley instead, but Kiley turned the role down, so Wanger recruited 2 relative newcomers in the starring roles, Kevin McCarthy and Dana Winter. The film doesn't waste any of its 80-minute runtime getting into the action. Right from the opening credits, the music sets up the terror and paranoic feel of the film with the soundtrack by composer Carmen Dragon. In the opening scene, which is a flash forward, we find Dr. Miles Bennell, played by Kevin McCarthy, frantically trying to convince doctors about the alien seed pod takeover.
Doctor, will you tell these fools I'm not crazy? Make them listen to me before it's too late!
This scene and the one at the end were added later because the studio felt the original ending was far too depressing, despite producer Siegel's objections. In a later interview, Siegel stated, "The film was nearly ruined by those in charge at Allied Artists, who added a preface and an ending that I don't like." Back in the present, Dr. Bonnell returns from a convention to the small town of Santa Mira and is greeted at the train station by his nurse and friend Sally Withers. While driving to his office with Sally, Miles comes to a halt when a boy runs into the road. Soon after, he discovers that the boy is convinced that his mother is not his mother. We then meet the love interest for Miles, Becky Driscoll, his former girlfriend, who has returned to town following her divorce. There's some nice interplay between the two, and then Becky tells Miles about her cousin, who has the same delusion, that her Uncle Ira isn't her Uncle Ira. We then discover the people all over town think that their family members are not who they really are. At only 20 minutes in, we get our first look at one of the seed pod replicants. Despite its low budget and short production schedule, Invasion of the Body Snatchers is a disturbing thriller. Siegel kept the movie out of the hands of Allied Artists' special effects crew, who wanted to make it a monster picture. The pod people's birth is unsettling enough, and the humanoid blanks are extremely disturbing. Especially the scene where Miles takes a pitchfork to the half-formed replicas of himself and his friends. In order to make these replicas, the actors were laid down on slanted boards and covered from head to toe in plaster of Paris. The molds were then filled with foam rubber and are terrifyingly real in the final scene. Even in the calmest moments of the film, the atmosphere has a surreal feel that is very effective, eerie, and suspenseful. It appears that everything is back to normal for a moment as serene music is playing in the distance. But when Miles investigates, he sees the townspeople loading trucks full of seed pods to be delivered to neighboring cities. It is then that we're set up for the most frightening moment of the movie. When Miles returns to Becky to warn her, she falls asleep for a moment, but that moment is all that it takes. When she opens her eyes again, you can tell immediately that she's been taken over by the seed pods. For a novel adapted into 4 different movies, the original is still my favorite adaptation. Shot in black and white with a shadowy film noir feel, it has an otherworldly quality, setting it apart from the other remakes. Incredibly, Invasion of the Body Snatchers still packs a punch today with its passionate and literate writing, fast pacing, and grounded themes. It has a far more significant impact than simply using monster makeup and invading Martians to shock and surprise the audience. The fear of identity loss and the losing of one's very soul is frightening enough, perhaps even more frightening as the enemy's face is the same one looking back at you in the mirror. Well, that's it for today, guys. Join us again for more classic TV and movie trivia, reviews, and retrospectives on Rerun Zone. Goodbye for now.